Welcome to the Troy Kearns podcast. We discuss real estate investing, entrepreneurship, and business to help you retire and become financially free. Make sure you share this podcast with someone who could benefit from it and leave us a 5-star review. It truly helps me out. This show will mentor you towards financial freedom. If I can do it, so can you.
I was doing some research. You're a pretty accomplished guy, and I know we met a while back when you came over to my property over there. And when I heard about who was running, you were the guy that, after just like, honestly, I didn't even look at party lines or anything, just the guy that I felt the most approachable to, and somebody that I could have a candid conversation. Just like, I feel like I have a pretty good instinct with people. And so I really wanted to get to know you on this platform and allow you to kind of explain why you're running for Kansas City mayor. So I guess if you want to start there.
Yeah, so no, I appreciate it. I'll jump in first by saying one of the nice things about municipal races is they are nonpartisan. So you're solving problems. I was I am a Democrat when I was down in Jeff City, but that was hyper partisan, and that got old. And I was down there to help people and make things better. And I never got too into the partisan fighting. And a lot of my friends were Republicans, some were Democrats. Just figure out the issues you can work on together and work on them. So that is a huge part of the appeal for city government. And things have gotten so toxic, both in DC and even at the state capitals right now, that I just don't have any interest in partisan politics right now. I'm interested in trying to make my neighbors' lives better. And in the mayor's office, you get a chance to do that.
That's great. Yeah. And that was actually one of my questions. Is there is a lot of identity politics. You are considered a Democrat. People tend to, just like myself included, sometimes we just vote. If we don't know who the person is, we vote with who we think that person should be based off of what our party is. I think that could bode well for you in Kansas City, being that it tends to lean Democratic. But like, what makes you, like, a lot of the Democrats are leading with this crazy woke agenda with like all of these things. And I don't see you as that type of a person. But I do know that in Kansas City, I mean, the mayor has had some pretty controversial views.
Yes. Well, I'll just tell you, Kansas City, even that last election with VP Harris and President Trump, that was, VP Harris got more than 70% of the vote citywide. So that's just the political reality. And it's a much different political reality down in Jeff City, of course. But like I said, it's nonpartisan, and that's one of my favorite things about it. So the things I like talking about are public safety, making sure that people feel safe when they're walking down the street. Number 2 is economic development, making sure that we're creating good jobs, that we're attracting good jobs, that you can actually afford to buy something after a hard day's work. And then the third, of course, is basic services. You want the trash to get picked up, you want the snow to get plowed, and you want to just live your life and not have to think too much about those basic needs. And none of that's partisan. That's all stuff that a good leader can do regardless of their partisan preferences.
So let's jump right into that. I'm newer here. I've been out here for about 5 years. I've had a lot of property break-ins, a lot of crime out here in Kansas City. And we got a great police force, but nobody's solving that personal property crime. How do we make our city safer for our residents? What would you do, I guess, as the mayor?
So, I'll tread lightly here, because I want to start by saying that Kansas City is too dangerous right now. There's too much crime right now, period. I'm not going to tell you any different than that. I am pretty optimistic about it, though, for a couple of reasons. The biggest one, and I'll give Councilman Nathan Willett a lot of credit here, is a couple of years ago, we increased our starting pay at KCPD by quite a bit. And we've seen our biggest police academy classes in years. And it's not just 1 or 2, it's happening regularly now. So last I checked, we're up to about 1,250 full-time police officers. We need 1,400, so we've got a ways to go, but we're trending the right direction there. So that's helpful. Every statistic in the world shows that when you've got a full police force, your city is safer, and that is going the right direction. Number 2 is, Kansas City is the biggest city in America without a municipal jail. And that's not a political statement. It's just a fact. Kansas City does not have a municipal detention facility. And so what we do is we outsource our jail basically to Nevada down in Vernon County, Missouri, and Warrensburg in Johnson County, Missouri. And we've got about 110 beds contracted between those 2 counties. And that just is not a very good solution. So last April, we passed a public safety sales tax extension, and a big chunk of that money is going toward building an in-house Kansas City jail or detention facility again, which we desperately need. So that's going to open sometime this summer. That's going to help a lot. We worked with the state, and the state is building a mental health facility in the historic Northeast. And I don't love the location there, but I'm glad we're getting that. And we're going to have several of the beds in that hospital dedicated to Kansas City patients that we need in a mental health treatment facility. So a big piece of it's the police. A big piece of it is actually having a jail. And then a big piece of it really is addressing mental health, which we've done a pretty crummy job of. So I'm long way to go, but I think we are going the right direction.
I agree with all of that you said. I didn't know about a lot of what you just said right there. How big is the jail going to be? I did know that we've had that issue. I didn't know it had been solved. So how big is the jail going to be?
So we're starting off with 60 beds, and it'll be over 100 soon. It goes up to 120 beds. But the beauty of the way it's designed is that it's a modular jail, so we can continue to add on to that in a pretty effective and efficient way. I don't think there's any plans to go higher than 150 beds or so right now. We need more beds than that, and I will push for more beds than that. But not in the short term. Good news is in the long term, we can do it in a way that's, responsible for the taxpayers.
To me, the problems about like crime always kind of go to drugs and alcohol. How do we address that issue with drugs and alcohol? I mean, you mentioned the health thing, but to me, the availability, there's pot stores popping up everywhere. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol. I know they passed, or the mayor was kind of trying to get some ordinance about these small bottles, which I mean, I don't think that's going to do anything. I think you got to stop people from drinking, and you got to enforce the rules. I got people crapping all over my building downtown Kansas City. And it's always drunk and homeless people. And generally, I think, like I said, alcohol and drugs, how do we solve that issue?
That's a massive issue, right? And I'll tell you, one of the good news about local government is you can really make a big impact on certain issues. And then there are other issues that, frankly, are national issues that everybody's fighting. But there are things we can do at the local level. And I'll tell you the biggest one. You mentioned marijuana, and voters statewide, we approved marijuana. We said we're going to sell legal marijuana, like it or not. It's in the Constitution now. That's what we're doing. However, what we've seen pop up after marijuana became legal is a lot of unregulated marijuana too. So, if you're a cannabis dealer with the state license, everything has to be labeled. It has to be tested. It is highly regulated. Everything is getting taxed. There's a pretty significant tax on that has helped the state budget some. So no matter how you feel about marijuana, I have a lot of concerns about it. And frankly, after it got legalized, my concerns have grown. But we do at least have a white market for marijuana now that is regulated, and that's good. The bigger issue in Kansas City is we've got this proliferation of unregulated cannabis. So you've got it's called intoxicating hemp. And the challenge there is, if you go to some vape shop on any street corner, go north of the river, we've got them up there too. You've got poorly labeled, poorly tested products that probably shouldn't be on the shelf. I have a hard time believing they're paying the right tax rate on those unregulated products. So to me, what we need to do in the short term is attack those unregulated products and make sure people know what they're putting into their bodies. That is something we can control at the local level that would make a difference.
I agree with that. But what do you do for the people who are, no matter what, going to put it in their body and going to do something? How do we stop the violent crime and the property crime from I'm imagining I'm gonna kind of roll into this question a little bit, because you've been on the good side and the bad side. Like, you're a prosecutor, which means you're putting people away, but you are also a public defender in Buchanan County. So as somebody who probably has seen it, you're seeing it go all the way full circle from the person who got caught, they got in trouble, you're defending them, and now the person who's putting them away. So I know you probably have learned a lot about human beings and changed your viewpoints over time as well. What have you learned in those positions, and how would you apply that to your mayor position?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, I was actually a public defender before I was a prosecutor. So when you're 25 years old, you're a brand new lawyer, they give you the child support cases. So you're representing these guys who didn't pay their child support. And more often than not, there's substance abuse issues there. There's mental health issues there. There's all of these societal issues that you're talking about. And it starts with, it's just like you learned in DARE class. It starts with these gateway problems, and then eventually it'll into more serious crimes. And so I spent significantly more time as a prosecutor than I did as a public defender. And most of my time as a prosecutor, I was prosecuting the the really violent guys, the murderers and the rapists and the people that really just need to go to prison for a long time. And there's a huge range of criminal activity. Some of it is you're in a pinch, you steal something from Walmart. We don't need to put you in prison. We need to figure out what the root cause of that is and get you back on the right track and help you find a job and get what you need. And there's people who do just unspeakable things and they need to be locked up and thrown away the key or worse. And so, the criminal justice system is a vast expanse of outcomes. And a lot of that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with mental health and substance abuse. And so, so I guess I agree with you is you've got to invest in addressing substance abuse. You've got to invest in mental health, or you're just going to continue to have these problems that result in violent crimes.
So as a property owner, one thing that I know perpetuates the problem is copper and recycling of metals. How I think, if I always look at, if I have an opportunity to speak with somebody who's got the potential to be in that seat, which I think you have a great shot at, Wes, how do you how can you if you can stop the recyclers from taking it from drug dealers, or from drug users who are stealing people's furnaces? It's like the whole broken window theory, right?
Oh yeah.
Set it up. Would you be open to making sure that these regulated industries like recycling, that they actually have to take people's IDs, and if there's people who are they have to find out where they got it or something like that, so that these people can't steal other people's property and recycle it?
So quick side story on that. So the biggest case I ever prosecuted as a prosecutor was a triple homicide at a hotel. It was teenage kids, absolutely horrific fact pattern. Oh. And the kid who the murderer was driving an old Jeep, and he took that immediately to his dad. And him and his dad went and had it scrapped over on the east side of Kansas City. So all of the evidence was gone within hours of that. And I spent a lot of time down there, after the fact, talking to witnesses and that sort of thing. And I will tell you, and this is important, no matter what line of work you're in, I lease commercial dishwashers. I used to be a lawyer. I guess technically I'm a lawyer. No matter what line of work you're in, there are good actors and there are bad actors. And there are really good actors who are recycling metal. It's a really fair way to make a living. If you're not lucky enough to go to law school, you can make a good living doing that. So it's not like they're all bad. They're just not. No. But there are definitely bad actors there. And the bad actors are the one that are buying the copper. It's not just you who's a victim of that. That's the reason that a lot of the city fountains aren't on, is because they've been stripped of all that stuff. And so the city's a victim of that too. And so, you've got to, it's an economy just like anything else. And if you disincentivize something, less of it will happen. So if we hammer the bad actors in the metal recycling industry, there will be fewer bad actors. And that's something that the city can do to a point, but we can only prosecute misdemeanors ordinance violations. That really is a state crime, because most of the time that's going to be a felony, but we can work together with them for sure. Yeah,
that's tough. So you mentioned that the water fountains affect the taxpayers in the city. There's a lot of taxes in Missouri, way more than I'm used to. Like Airbnb taxes, earnings taxes. How do we roll back these tax dollars or use them more wisely?
Yeah. So to me, the issue, again, it's basic economics. So for the city of Kansas City, we've got 512,000 people in 319 square miles. So it's not a very dense city, which makes it really expensive to operate. And so that's part of the reason our taxes are high, is because we just don't have enough people for 319 square miles. One thing we're really, frankly, very bad at is creating a good environment for builders to build more houses. I've got all sorts of friends who build housing, who would like to build housing in Kansas City, who own property in Kansas City, but it's just too cumbersome. So they end up going to other jurisdictions to build houses. There's, and I'm a Northland, I know you are too, there's expanses of our city that are just prime for single family development. And that would benefit our city, because you have more taxpayers there. The other piece of that is business. We're 23% of the KC Metro is the city of Kansas City, and we're not 23% of the economy. So we need to be more business friendly in Kansas City. And if we attract more business to our city, that'll be, more of the tax burden to spread out amongst people paying into it. So to me, that's the solution. We need more people moving into our city, and we need our businesses to be successful.
So how do you encourage that? How do you get, you brought up a great point. I look at a town like Kansas City's been successful kind of in spite of itself in some ways. And if you look at, if I'm running a mayor, if you're the mayor, right? or when you're the mayor, like you got to attract these businesses. So how do you attract like the AIs and also keep those good paying construction jobs that are prevalent here? There's a lot of good union jobs for people who are in Kansas City. I see that as probably the number one thing that I see as an outsider coming in, but I see where you're I'm from Seattle originally. So I see like what happened in Seattle as a blue collar town, basically with Boeing and Weyerhaeuser, a logging company and an airplane manufacturer is what it was based out of. Now it's all tech. And I watched what happened to that marketplace. How do you attract those high paying tech jobs so you can get it? Because what you need is that one incubator like Microsoft or Amazon. And then all those other tech offshoots pop up. How do you attract those?
That's a great question. And it goes hand in hand too, right? So if you go downtown right now, there aren't nearly enough cranes in the sky. And if there's a crane in the sky building some new headquarters for a tech company, that's going to be union labor that's building that tower, right? So everybody benefits from that. And one of Kansas City's strengths is that we've got a pretty diverse local economy. We don't have, like we're not totally focused on aviation or totally focused on, heavy manufacturing or whatever. It's pretty well distributed. So that's recession resistant to a point, and that's good. But we've got to attract these anchor tenants back to Kansas City. And if you look at our peer cities, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Minneapolis, they've all got big Fortune 500 companies in their downtowns, in their urban core. And that helps in so many different ways. And we just don't have that in Kansas City, mostly because of bad luck. But we've got to attract some of those big acre tenants back to the urban core. And I'll give you a really good example. Evergy is the biggest private company in downtown Kansas City. Their lease is coming up in a few years, and we need to make sure to protect what we've got. And they're a great partner to the city, and I'm sure we'll work it out. But we want them here. They need to know that we want them here. And then we need to go find them some friends too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think with them is you got those guys by the short hairs, because to be honest with you, I mean, you guys, they're the reason that they're getting all the business. They better not leave. I mean,
they're easy to, I'm not. Yeah, I imagine they'll stay, but I'm just saying I'm thankful for them because they're one of the few big companies that is still in downtown Kansas City, and let's get them long-term and then set the stage for more. And then another thing that's a little bit of a challenge unique to Kansas City that goes with that tech conversation is we've got a great university in UMKC. And it just recently got a Research One designation from the federal government, which is going to attract a lot more research dollars to our city. And they've got a great chancellor who's basically identified medicine as the place to grow. So we already had great pharmacy, dental school, nursing school, medical school there, and it's just going to continue to get better. So that'll help attract some of the tech jobs too, especially as they continue to grow. And I'll give the Kansas side of the state line some credit there too, because they've got a great medical campus in KU as well. But yeah, I saw, this is a little bit off topic, but Pittsburgh just had a new mayor get sworn in. And one of the first things he did, which may have been a little bit of a publicity stunt, but I thought it was great. He was just cold calling tech CEOs and saying, hey, what's it going to take to invest in Pittsburgh? We've got everything you need here. And I think Kansas City's got a lot of those same things to offer. So let's go find these tech companies in expensive cities like Seattle and explain to them why they should give Kansas City a chance.
Yeah, and I got a lot to say about that because I've been traveling all around the country. I think it's just like you got to make it more business friendly. You got to attract, like if you look at the things like even with the airport, yeah, that's great. It's fine. It's a nice airport. It's clean. It's new. But I felt like there were some major mistakes made on that airport. I know you're not the one that designed it and everything like that. But like if we want to make it a hub and attract Delta, right now we're a Southwest hub. But if we want to get like Delta in here or something like that, I mean, Kansas City, as you know, is well poised to be a hub for any company. And I think that it comes down to, for businesses, dollars and cents and school systems. And we protect our schools a lot out here, but those dollars that are supposed to be protected to the schools don't match some of the educations in the city core. So how do you raise the grades for those kids where all those dollars are already going there? It's not about more dollars. It's just about making sure that the people are getting the right amount of money so that the academics can be brought up.
Yeah. So first of all, let me give you a little life hack. The next time you're at the airport, if you go to the left in B terminal, we've got almost no airplanes down there ever, but there's a Dunkin' Donuts that's open. So if you ever want to skip the lines, go to that Dunkin' Donuts on that left turn into B terminal.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I've never been on that terminal. I know like there's nothing there. It's crazy.
the only reason I go down there is to the Dunkin' Donuts, but we've got the capacity there. So to me, that's an opportunity. Is we've got a full wing of the airport that's ready for more air travel. We've just got to be a kind of city that people want to fly into more. So that's part of it. But the other thing is we can lean into our natural advantages. So, we've got 4 host countries coming here for the World Cup. And one of the reasons we were able to get so many countries here to Kansas City was because of the geography. So if they're playing in Monterey or they're playing in San Jose or New York City, they're 3 hours away from everything. So we've got great highway transportation here. We're one of the biggest rail hubs in the country. We've got a part of the biggest river system in North America here. We do have a world-class airport. So we need to lean into that and use that to our advantage. We don't have mountains. We don't have beaches. That's fine. We've got something to sell people. We need to go sell it.
Yeah. And I'm going to go backwards a little bit. So like part of the reason that we have all that stuff is because we had a really good visionary. Like I think that Sly James and Kay Barnes did a great job, I'm going to say, of, being willing to make some major sacrifices with the Power and Light District and make what would be arguably bad deals for the city. But they saw the vision of what they would create with those things. And I'll just call it like it is. Mayor Lucas is getting a lot of the credit, but a lot of those things were put in place by people who had great vision. What vision do you have, Wes, like some of the other great leaders that have had to make sure that we make these investments now so that things can happen later?
So first of all, I agree with you. I think Kay Barnes and Mayor James are 2 of the great visionary leaders we've had in the city ever. And we can continue to build off that, right? And both of them were willing to take on hard fights and sometimes unpopular fights. And it's not just Power and Light. You're talking about the airport, the Lowe's Convention Hotel, which the Lowe's has been a great thing for our city, the streetcar. And I'll pivot on the streetcar a little bit. That can be a little controversial, but you look at the economic activity along that streetcar line, it's unbelievable. And it's going to continue to be unbelievable. And you'll see multifamily continue to get built along that streetcar line. You'll continue to see the restaurants do well there. And so they had the vision to do that and fight through some of the resistance to get that done. And then I lost my train of thought, but yeah.
Those
are great projects.
What things would you do similar to those that are going to lay the groundwork that are going to be unpopular? Because that's exactly it. They were willing, and you said it yourself, they were willing to make those fights that were unpopular at the time. But from my understanding, there was nothing going on downtown. There was a dust bowl.
No, I remember driving down there in the late 90s, and it was a dust bowl. There's no better way to describe it. And so, yeah, you see what it looks like now. It's active. It's vibrant. There's people walking around all the time. And you've chosen to be down there. It's a great city, and it's getting better. And, I think the Long family, for the great work they've done on the riverfront, the West Bottoms is getting redone right now by another group that's done a great job. Obviously, baseball's coming into Crown Center. We're looking at doing a plaza redevelopment. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about the urban core, and we've got to keep that going. And what I'll tell you is, to me, the next step. So now we've got all these things to sell. And if you go to some place like Indianapolis, they've done a really good job. They got a lot to sell there too. And what's resulted in that is a lot of convention business, people going to Indianapolis not expecting much and walking out thinking, wow, this is a city where things are happening. Kansas City's on that same trajectory as long as we keep that vision. And so to me, the next thing has got to be a facelift of the convention center, because we've got a city that we can sell to outsiders now. And the way you do that is by making a major investment in our convention center.
I think that's a great idea. I'm so glad that you brought it up, because I actually visited Indianapolis in 2010 as an investor. And then I visited right before I came here. And I said, man, that's all. I watched that thing go from here to there, and I missed it. And I felt Kansas City had the same potential. One thing I'm going to bring up, because you just mentioned it and it's going there. But one thing I think that most people miss in Kansas City is you just mentioned the Long's investment in the riverfront, which I think is absolutely the best thing. We need to put more money there. Now, the biggest waste of money that we have as Kansas City is that stupid airport on the water, the executive airport that nobody uses. That's 674 acres of prime real estate that would go in conjunction, and that could be your legacy. Now, I had the same opportunity. I was randomly paired by Mayor Quentin Lucas on the airport. I told him this whole thing. I said, man, if you want to make it work, this is before the Chiefs left. I'm like, if you want to make it work with the Chiefs and the Royals and the next hockey team and the basketball team, you develop that riverfront and you make that the sports complex, and you get Elon Musk over here. You build a tunnel to the freaking airport. And I mean, like, those are the types of things that I'm talking about. Like, in my opinion, it's a waste. That whole thing down there is a waste. It limits our crane's ability to build higher buildings because we have the fly zone. So are you open to doing something like that?
So I will tell you, yes, I am open. And we've seen, even since I've been on the council, we've seen some projects either get derailed or minimized just because you can only go so high close to that airport. But I'll also tell you this, that airport has some huge fans, and you're poking a bear when you go down that road. Yes, I'm open to it, and we've got to do what makes the most sense for our city. But I will tell you, that's a heck of a fight.
Yeah, I'm with you on it, though. But at the end of the day, I think if you lined up everybody and you said, okay, yeah, there's some guys who got some jets in there. At the end of the day, if the juice was worth the squeeze, like we can see the total vision, I don't even think it's an issue, because I look at that and I'm like, just go invest more money at the KCI. You know what I mean? It's like, it's this, I don't see a lot of planes landing there. I'm down there all the time. So
yeah, well, that was in my district when I was a state rep. And if you go just to the east of there to that old Holiday Inn, that part of our city needs a lot of investment. And I'm not sure, unless we do anything, unless there's a major transformation, I'm not sure where that investment's going to come from. And there's a North Kansas City levee district right on the north side of the river. And we've got all the typical problems you'd expect out of that. A lot of crime, a lot of riffraff, a lot of trouble. And it's a really good opportunity there, right? There's acres and acres and acres, both on the east and west side of 169 there, that we could do something with. So I'm actually touring the east side tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to hearing what some of the ideas are about it. Because right now it's wasted space right across from a wonderful downtown.
Well, you mentioned Cincinnati, and I think when I look at that, I'm like, man, Cincinnati's got all of their ball fields right on that river there. They really take advantage of it. Then you go look at Washington, D.C. Same thing. What are they doing with the Nationals? It's great that we're putting the Royals. I think that's a great place for it. But I think that if Wes Rogers, and I'm going to use my opportunity to try to convince you, I think if Wes Rogers designates that KCI airport to be some sort of a development zone where, like they did with the Chiefs in Kansas, if you did something like that, it would change the entire trajectory of Kansas City. I believe that. I'm going to continue to say it to anybody that'll listen, because I believe that's going to be the one thing that everybody's like, oh, it can't be done. It's kind of like, well, it can if you get the right person.
I'll tell you, I've been through Cincinnati too, and you cross the state line into Covington, Kentucky, and Covington is pretty nice. So maybe there's some opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So what do you think the biggest problem facing Kansas City is, Wes?
It's public safety, whether real or perceived. And I think it's a combination, but people need to feel safe in our city.
So how do you think Mayor Lucas has done?
It's always easy to criticize the person in the office that you're running for. Obviously, I think he's done some good things. I think he's done some things I wouldn't have done. The most recent announcement is baseball, and that's going to be a great project. So to me, I'm just way more focused on what the next 8 years look like than comparing myself to Quentin. And he's a friend, and anytime I've had an issue at City Hall, he's always been open-minded to whatever I want to deal with.
Yeah, I think he's a great advocate for Kansas City, a great poster child. I know he does have a lot of feedback. The one thing I would tell him, he's a little bit to my identity politics on my end, but as a person, he seems like he does what he says and says what he does. There was I wanted to roll into that Royals situation with the Royals. I was so happy to see us get that done. And I was happy that he was able to get that done after, and Sherman stuck it out. I think that you got a great partner with John Sherman being willing, and the Hall family, all of that. What do you think that's going to, I was in Seattle when they put Safeco down in that type of an area, and then I watched the Seahawks build right next door. So I've seen that full picture and what it can do to a downtown. I'm going to tell you, it's going to be amazing. I'm super excited to see it happen. And I'm so thankful for all of the participants. I want to give them, like I said, Mayor Lucas, the Sherman family, everybody who participated in that situation, because people got to understand that's a game changer for downtown Kansas City. Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah. And I've been, I went down to testify actually in Jefferson City when the state was putting together their piece of that package. And, I'll die on that hill. I think that it's a great project for our city. And I've been trying to be as helpful as much as I can be. And I have gotten to know John Sherman a little bit, not well, but a little bit over the last year or so. And we're so lucky to have an owner that committed to Kansas City, and his vision on that is why we've gotten this as far as we've gotten it. But real quick side note, just yesterday, Children's Mercy, their new neighbor, announced $1 billion expansion. So you're going to do $3 billion with a B worth of development at the Royal Stadium. You're going to do another $1 billion worth of investment next door at Children's Mercy. It's going to change our entire city for for 50 years or longer. And it's very cool to be a part of that. And I think I don't think everybody fully appreciates what that's going to look like when it's done.
No, you got to be the visionary. I 100% agree with you. Yeah, like people always want to say no. Let's keep it. Let's not change it. But I'm with you 100% on there. How do we get a basketball team here?
I asked that question. You're talking about Seattle. It sounds like
I want the
Seattle.
Sonics.
What's that?
Yeah, I was at the last Sonics game when we lost them.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I know that it sounds. I forget, you might know. But for the NHL, it sounds like it's. I'm drawing a blank, but there's a couple of cities in front of us for expansion on both NHL and NBA that are kind of the front runners. I think it's Las Vegas and Seattle are the two for the NBA, and then for the NHL, it's Atlanta and maybe Houston. I mean, and that's all just rumors, of course. Nobody knows for sure. But you look at any list on NBA or NHL expansion, and Kansas City's always somewhere on that list from third to seventh most likely destination. So yeah, let's figure out how to bump our way into the top of that. But we do, a couple things. What's that?
I was there in Vegas when Vegas. So I moved to Vegas back in 2006 when sports wasn't even they said it was never going to happen. Kind of like that airport thing. It's never going to happen here because we got gambling. And then Bill Foley, who owns Chicago Title, took a gamble and did it with the NHL team. And then everybody jumped on. So it takes that visionary, because we just had Steve Sisolak on the podcast, who was the former governor of Nevada.
Oh, wow.
And so I just spoke to him about this whole thing, and he was the visionary for all of that stuff that happened. He was the one that made all of that stuff happen. Like, there would not be the Oakland Athletics in Las Vegas. There wouldn't be the Raiders. None of that stuff happened because he was willing to have those hard arguments and stuff like that. So I'd love to see you say on a national platform, I'll do whatever it takes. You know what I mean?
Oh,
yeah.
100%, 100%. And at some point, some arena lease will expire or someone's ownership will change hands. And every single time that happens, we got to be knocking on the door, letting them know what we've got to offer in Kansas City. But a big part of that goes back to what I was saying earlier. We've got to attract more anchor tenants to downtown. We've got to bring more Fortune 500 businesses to Kansas City, because that's one of the big things that those teams look for.
You want to know how to do it?
How?
Get Elon Musk here. If you can get Elon Musk, you can change everything. I know he's in Austin, Texas, but if someone was able to actually treat that guy like the way he needs to be treated, you got a guy who's building all the rockets, everything. If you could get one of his companies, you make it the Tesla Sports Complex or something like that. That you get a tunnel from the airport from his tunneling company. I'm telling you, if I was the mayor, I'd say, how do I get guys like Elon Musk or, any of these big innovators? I'm not saying just because I know it's unpopular, the billionaires. I'm talking about guys who are game changers, who change industries. And to me, Elon Musk, he's building rocket ships. He's got cars, self-driving cars. He's digging tunnels, he's changing everything. Robots.
No, I don't disagree. And I'll tell you an example I'll use of another city who's seen that success is Detroit. So Dan Gilbert up there, he invested and invested and invested. And I have not been to Detroit for several years, but he's doing exactly what you're talking about up there.
Well, yeah, actually he bought over, I think I followed that whole journey. Dan Gilbert's one of my heroes, and Dan Gilbert worked at, actually owned a thing called Red Mortgage, changed it into Quicken Loans, and then bought back Quicken Loans from Quicken, and then basically sold, rebought it, and then turned it into Rocket Mortgage. He owns Redfin, he owns Fat Boys, he owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he's a Detroit boy, so he bought up all of the Detroit for all of his businesses. But unless you have like a Kansas City boy like that, which we had with Lockton, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. You got to attract those guys who are like, hey, and you got to cut those deals that people think aren't bad, because it attracts all of those ancillary dollars that just don't compute on paper a lot of times.
And you've got a good point there. So Gilbert's from Detroit, so he's got a dog in that fight. Maybe we've got somebody who's already invested in Kansas City, or maybe we got to show somebody what we've got to offer here, because there's a lot of opportunity for the right person or people.
Well, there's a lot of big companies that I'm quite flabbergasted that are from, like, you got J.E. Dunn is a major company. You've got a lot of these big, I think there's that one out of St. Joe. It's a big asphalt or railroad company. I forget what it is.
Herzog.
What's that? Yeah, that one.
Herzog.
Yeah, it's some of these companies, they stay because they don't want to move. But I think to attract those the jobs of the future, you have to lay the groundwork and say like, hey, we're sitting here, we're looking for everybody. I have a couple controversial questions. So
all right, I'm ready.
Okay, so the last two mayors have been African American. As a white Democrat running now, do you see race as an obstacle versus certain voter blocks? And do you think identity politics has played too big of a role in city leadership?
So I actually think that's one of Kansas City's greatest strengths. Our last 6 mayors, 3 have been white, 3 have been black. Kansas City, the best person's going to win.
Awesome. So you don't see it as a problem at all?
Not at all.
Okay. So KC tenants, these guys have disrupted a lot of things. In fact, they have a couple, I think, Jonathan Duncan is a member of KC tenants. They've swayed a lot of votes. They're pretty tough opponent because people don't want to get blasted by them. How do you stand up to people like this and also help them achieve their objectives without taking other people's objectives away?
Yeah. So I'll just tell you, I grew up single mom. My dad was in and out of jail. Our lights would get shut off regularly. So I've lived it. I know what it's like to try to scratch out an existence. And so the thing I appreciate about the tenants is they're advocating for people who are living a very similar life to what I grew up in. So I can relate and I appreciate and you can appreciate it, right? They're trying to help regular people get by. More often than not, we disagree. I'm not going to pretend like we don't. But what I will tell you, Troy, is that if you talk to the tenants union leaders, they know that if they call me, I'll answer the phone, even if I'm going to disagree with them. I don't hide from them. We talk all the time. Jonathan Duncan is actually a friend of mine. He's a fun guy to drink a beer with. He's a fun guy to talk about sports with. We disagree a lot. We disagree a whole lot.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, but right. I mean, we're pretty far apart. But you can still communicate with people, and they just
you have to be able to.
End of the day, I'll answer the phone. I'll be straight up with you on where I land. We may agree. We probably won't agree, but the phone is always on, and when it rings, I'm going to answer it. And maybe we can find some things we can work on together. And if we can't, then we'll just talk about.
So you answer my question is you'll stand up to them because I mean they're tough. A lot of people are even scared to talk about them, and I'm like, I see them as like I'm the same way, man. My mom was we were tenants, lifetime tenants. My mom didn't own a house till her father passed away, and I'm like I'm a housing provider, and I relate to my tenants. I don't raise rent, and I said like there's a bigger issue. We got to work together on this thing, and I couldn't even get a conversation with Tara Raghoover. She's like, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm like, if you're not going to talk to somebody, how are you going to accomplish your mission? And a couple things that I think about is like number one is like Kansas City right now has got a few problems. And one of them is the fact that like the things that people don't talk about, like when we have to evict someone, I can't just go down as an owner of a house and file an eviction. I actually have to go and pay an attorney $500 or $600. When you're an attorney, you can understand that. So now that tenant who's going to have to pay at least $500 or $600, that's going to affect them. Versus if they're just behind on a rent, and I could post it and I could file it with the court system, and we could work out something where the court system's at my advantage. I've got to actually hire an attorney contractually as an LLC, which doesn't make a good bit of sense. So now that tenant is in a bad situation because now they're not only like behind on their rent, now they're an extra $700-800 behind because of that thing. Mm-hmm. I would ask you to propose an ordinance that allows for tenants and owners, whether they're LLCs or not, to do their own evictions through city provided services and eliminate expensive attorneys. No disrespect to you.
But I sell dishwashers mostly.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But because a lot of times that fee affects that family that they can't climb out of that. And now they didn't just go from being late on rent. They're actually now have an eviction. They can't get a property. And then that downward spiral happens again.
So I'll pick on my friends on the left a little bit on that. So one thing that we often try to do the right thing and end up making things more expensive, and then the results there that the rent gets higher. So if you're talking about the energy codes, for example, I sponsored an ordinance to change our energy code, and that's going to reduce the cost of housing, right? So anytime we're putting in roadblocks or creating rules or paperwork or processes, it just makes things more expensive. And so if we're serious about delivering more affordable housing, we need to reduce as many barriers as possible, right? And on the left, we just have a tendency to create barriers with good intentions that oftentimes don't turn out the way we want them to turn out.
100%. So you mentioned you're a business owner. That's a great thing to talk about. Like, as a business owner, like, what are your biggest concerns with Kansas City, like, just in general?
So that's kind of what prompted me to run for city council. And, you know, we and I don't do much of it anymore. We've got a leadership team that does that. And so I don't want to mix politics and business too much. But I'll just say, as someone who has done business in Kansas City, it is just objectively the most difficult place in the metro to do business. And some of that is the fact that we're twice the size of Overland Park, which is the next biggest city. So, you know, when you're bigger, there's just more paperwork, and that's going to be true probably anywhere. But if you want to get a permit for something, if you want to pay your fees, you know, my biggest complaint, I'll give you a really good example of this, is if you want to pay, if you want to give the city of Kansas City money, if you want to, you know, pay your e-tax, you've got to get online and do the quick tax thing, and you've got to have a special login for that. And then there's 1,000 different forms, and it's a cumbersome process.
Right.
And if you've just got one or two employees, you know, you don't necessarily have an accountant doing it. You've got to go input all of your W-2s one by one. You're not doing that in other local municipalities. If you want to pay your water bill, you go to a different website to pay your water bill to the city of Kansas City. If you want a permit, you go to a different website for the permit. If you want to get your dog license, to get your rabies tags, and you want to get your permit for your pet, that's a different website. And so it's just so hard to exist in the city of Kansas City compared to literally any other municipality in the region. So we've got to do something. I just, in this day and age with all the great technology, I just refuse to believe we can't figure out an affordable way to put all that in one website.
Yeah, just delete it. I mean, just like hit the delete button. Everything. I'm glad you mentioned that, because so many people don't see that. And it's like, I'll give you an example. I always feel like, coming from other cities, I mean, Las Vegas is pretty aggressive, but I feel like Kansas City's got their hand in my pocket everywhere I turn. Like Airbnb, we're going to get X number of dollars on your gross things. It's like, well, what the hell are you doing for us? Like, there's certain things that I think that we got to be business friendly, where we're making it easy, like you said, for people to do business, whether they're a business owner or they're a consumer. One of the things that I had a big problem with is, and this didn't affect me, believe me, this is just something I saw affecting the common man. I saw these parking brigades out there issuing parking tickets in really poor communities. And these were like not a city representative. They were like a subcontractor, because they were like out there like, oh, cool, we're going to get like a bonus for the number of tickets. And I'm like, if we're doing that to try to generate revenue, then we're not running the city the right way. Like we're not incentivizing people to do, let's incentivize people to do stuff versus take their money. And I look at things like that, like, how do we clean up the streets? Why don't we, create an incentive for people to clean it up, right? The cleanest yard or other things, contests like that. So I'm definitely with you on the pain in the ass it is to do business. That's another reason you need to get Elon Musk here, man. He could fix all that website stuff in a second.
There's companies even based out of Kansas City who streamline those processes. So yeah, if I get elected mayor, that's one of the first things we're taking on. It's just too hard to navigate that process.
Who do you think your biggest opponent is?
So far, Raina Parkshaw is the only person who's announced, and she's a friend. I like her a lot. Crispin Ray is going to run too, also a friend. And then there's a couple of outside candidates who have talked about running. So we'll see. I think it's too early to say who the favorites are, but I know all of the other people running, and I think highly of them. So I'm sure it'll be a tough race.
Raina's had some interesting, controversial stuff that came up lately. Do you think that's going to affect her race at all?
I mean, the general election's still over a year out. I imagine there's plenty of time to sort things out. And I don't know. I think there's still plenty of time for anybody.
So what's tougher, politics or business?
It depends on the day, but I'll tell you the biggest difference is it depends on the day, man. But I'll tell you, when you're a small business owner, we've got 24 employees. If a truck shows up and there's not anybody out in the warehouse, then I'm the one. That's why people always ask why I wear khakis instead of a suit. It's because if I'm at the warehouse and a truck shows up and I got to drive a forklift, it's a lot easier to do it in khakis and throw on a blazer later, right? And so I don't know. They're both hard, and it's just, and they're both fun, and they both have a lot of rewards. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do my best in elected office as long as I'm there, and then I'm going to go back to our warehouse. So that's we call ourselves soapers. I'm a soaper to my core, and that's what I'll always be. But if we can make the city a little better for a few years, I'll try to do that too.
I used to run a dish machine. I know that you sell them. My first job at Red Robin was my first real job. I worked at Burger King, everything, but the first real job, my first career was actually at Red Robin. I worked there for 8 years, and I started as a DMO, a dish machine operator. And, I was in the dish pit there, and I really actually enjoyed Red Robin in general. It was a great culture for me. I really learned a lot working there. So when I read your bio about you selling dish machines and equipment, I know that you're in those businesses and you've been in those businesses, and I really appreciate, and I think I want to advocate for you, because when I look at people's resumes, and I'll use like a Karen Bass or somebody out of LA, or like the lady who runs Seattle. They've never actually written a check. They've never dealt with an employee. They know the right word tracks to say. They know the right emotions to hit, but they've never actually had any controversial. Even Zohan Mandani, the mayor in New York, who's catching a lot of heat right now, and he should. You're in charge of this major asset, the city, right? With this huge purse. You know how to do it. You've got bills that you've got to pay. Like if things don't work out when you're selling dishwashers and employees and stuff like that, you got bills to pay. Like in the city, they just go bankrupt, right?
And it's hard to, and honestly, most people just don't get it until you've signed a personal guarantee for more money than you've got. It's hard to relate to the amount of risk that goes into that. And, you got payroll due. We do it weekly at our office. Our guys like getting paid every week. And I'm proud that it's, we're lucky. We've ran a great company for a long time, and we're proud that we can provide fair paychecks for 24 guys. And it's just hard to relate to it, though, unless you've been on the side of that where you've got to make sure that everything's going like it should, and you got a personal guarantee. Yeah,
man, it's really tough. I don't think most people will, because the average voter is not running a business, and they're like, whatever, man, as long as I'm getting my check. But it's so difficult. Like, I'm sure you feel the same way I do. It's like sometimes you're working for your people because you're worried about everybody's everybody's money, all your 24 people. You're like, you may not even have the money coming in, and you still got to make those checks. And I think it's I want to advocate like how important that is, that whoever that person who runs a city needs to understand how business works, because otherwise if you can run a bankrupt city is what I'm saying, and you can't run a bankrupt business. Business will punish you.
And I'll tell you a couple of things there. So my dad started our business out of a one-car garage in 2000 when I was 17 years old. So I was employee number 4. And when he started, dishwashers are expensive. And if you don't have a line of credit to go buy a dishwasher, good luck getting that thing started. And then about 10 years, 12 years after that, we bought another small company. And that was finally when I was getting into the point where I had equity. And so my wife was 8 months pregnant with our first son at the time. We go to the bank to take out this note to buy the second small business for more money than I had ever seen in my life. And my wife's 8 months pregnant. We signed these personal guarantees for this note for this second business. This is a true story. I leave the bank, drive to the warehouse from this company to start, doing our thing. And during the diligence process, it was our first time doing that. We learned a lot. Frankly, I wouldn't do that deal again.
Yeah.
But I sit down on the secretary's desk. Within minutes, some guy comes in asking where the coffee maker is, and I point him down the hallway. He comes back and says, "You guys didn't pay your bill. We're repossessing the coffee maker." That happened hours after we closed on this first deal, because the company we bought was in such bad shape. And I will tell you, we turned that from, my brother was a godsend on that, but we turned that company from red to black, and now it's still a part of our business today. And so you got to go through that grind before you're making decisions of the city. And there's so many other people who have identical stories to that one or worse, but it's hard to relate unless you've been there.
Yeah, I want to just echo that. If I would say vote for Wes Rogers, because just on the fact that you run a business alone and you've done, I would say, like, you have the best resume. You've been a public defender, a prosecutor, a business owner. Like, you don't see those types of resumes. Usually you have community activist, and it's so much different when you've represented people who are in their worst time of life, when you've prosecuted people who are in their worst time of life, and then when you've led businesses out of the red and into the black. I think that's the type of leadership that we need in Kansas City. And just like you've adjusted to all of those other roles, I know that you'll be a great leader for Kansas City. Is there anything that you want to add to people out there considering who the next mayor of Kansas City is going to be?
I'll just tell you, when I'm our next mayor, we will be open for business. We'll be safe. We're going to grow. It's going to be a fun time to be in our city.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you spending your afternoon with me and being so accommodating, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. And thank you for the opportunity. And I hope you start feeling better.